So as you can tell, this weekend we're going to be dealing with two lead characters who have seen death and managed to somehow come back, and will take a trip to Holy Shitsville and leave bodies behind them. Maybe. that's what we're promised from these two movies anyway. Which one delivers, if either does, I guess is what we're going to talk about. So, obviously, if you are aware of this setup at all, you know that I just love discussing Nicolas Cage movies to no end. And that's not like sarcasm. I love it. So, especially when he goes as over the top as possible, which clearly he has. So, I'd love to start with Drive Angry. The thing that actually prompted me to do this one was, I was watching some Nicolas Cage interviews this week because he's at Sundance with that new movie Mandy that's supposed to be totally insane. And I'll be talking about Mom and Dad next week, which is another one that's apparently completely psychotic. And on one of these interviews, somebody was asking him if he watches any of his movies or if he had lately, barring that, Cage Film Festival he attended last year. But the answer he gave was that he started revisiting Drive Angry because Axl Rose told him it was his favorite movie. And so it was like, and he said, oh, I guess I need to watch that again, and so he watched it a lot, and so it was like, I think I need to see Drive Angry again too, come to think of it. And of course I had it. You can tell, I didn't get this at Blockbuster as it probably looks like, but I did get it at a flea market like this. Still in the Blockbuster case with the Blockbuster stickers. And usually when that happens, I change them out to make the cases look cleaner. But I mean, what better movie to just have this really old-fashioned, beat-up look with Blockbuster stickers still on it? I'm keeping it this way forever. So it just seems absolutely appropriate. And it tells you exactly, once you have it in your hands, it's like you know exactly what you're in for just by that. So, going into it, obviously our setup is that he literally drives out of hell after having been killed to seek vengeance on Billy Burke for killing his daughter. And obviously it's pretty obvious that his name is John Milton, because of course it is, the whole Paradise Lost thing. We also explore that with Pacino and The Devil's Advocate, but that's just the tip of the iceberg here. He also is wielding a shotgun that apparently has the power to not only kill you, but it does not send you to heaven or hell. It wipes you from existence entirely and is called the God Killer. So that's just our setup. That's like the very prologue. That's like the first 30 seconds this is established. And the movie's an hour 45, so we've got a long ride to go. And another thing you want to notice is that it's one of those movies that it came out in early 2011, so the 3D thing was still happening all the time, and movies were being made for 3D, and this was one of those. So watching it now at home on DVD, you think you're gonna be able to tell that this was a made-for-3D movie. The limbs that fly off are gonna seem really animated. There's gonna be shit coming to the camera occasionally. And so yeah, you get used to that, especially if you know what you're in for. And obviously it introduces itself quickly. This is a movie that, the first two songs on the soundtrack are Raise a Little Hell and Fuck the Pain Away. That's in the first 5 minutes. So it's this, if you go into this movie getting anything else than what it sets up, and you don't like it, it's your own fault. Because the movie is just throwing clues at you constantly. It's like, hey guys, if this isn't your thing, get out while you still can. And then it keeps that up, through the whole thing. And that's the beauty of it. So, even starting off with just the way the characters interact, even if it's not even a crucial scene. This opening scene at the diner when he first meets Amber Heard. And we realize it feels like we're in a totally different world because just everybody is grabbing everybody. And it's there's just all kinds of inappropriate shit going on here, but this is what the movie revels in, and that's the point. So we've got Cage is at the diner, and his waitress just flat out basically says, are you gonna fuck me or not? And so he just grabs her unexpectedly and kisses her, and then a whole 10 seconds later, Amber Heard's boss is grabbing her, and she's grabbing him back, and it's like, what the fuck world is this? But it's like, we're already here. It's like, this is kind of the point of no return. Anything that happens from here, no matter how outlandish, has been set up. Our path has been set up for us. So now we have to choose to go down it. And with Cage at the wheel, literally, I would like to think a lot of people would be on board, so, or feel good in his crazy ass hands. So, going on that, obviously his co-star in this case is Amber Heard, who is sometimes can do really interesting stuff, sometimes maybe not so much. It might more so depend on the part itself. Here, there is an interesting thing that she is doing throughout it. She might just kind of seem like the whole sidekick character. You'll probably find yourself often asking the question, why does she stick by him the whole time? I mean, towards the very end, she finally gives the whole, well, I've been looking for purpose. It feels like nothing has purpose, and now I finally have a purpose. And it's like there's like 20 minutes left when she says that. So for the rest of the movie, we don't really know. But I guess it doesn't really matter in a movie like this. Because if you ask that question, I can't imagine the other questions you have. But the interesting thing she does do with her character is that she's able to do the tough girl thing, which can be a cliche if it's done in a bland way. But she has this way of balancing it with this kind of sweetness about her as well. Because, like, there's two particular scenes that stand out. The first one is this diner scene, when she's able to go back and forth between, when her and her boss are getting into it, and her giving these people, you know, free muffins because they're going to get thrown out and they look poor or whatever. And she's able to bounce back between those two, and then obviously later on, a much better example is in the hotel when Cage is banging another waitress in the other room very loudly, and she's very kind of girly in this scene, in a way we haven't really seen her in the movie up to this point. And she's like giggly and, you know, saying sorry and all that. And then just immediately in the same shot turns around and screams, "Shut the fuck up," while hitting the wall. And it's like she just goes right back and forth between those two personalities without even a cut in between. So I really like when she's able to bring that kind of stuff here. And talking about the other characters, obviously, this is a movie where everybody is chasing everybody all the time. Everybody wants to kill everybody in this movie. And Cage, in particular, is being pursued by a guy known as the Accountant, who's William Fichtner in a suit. And typically when you see William Fichtner in a suit, you think, oh yeah, I know this character, he's just this guy in here. Every now and then, Fichtner has those parts that really stand out, like in Go, for instance, that are just really off what we expect of him. But he's always been a really interesting actor, and so I really love that he was the one that ended up with this part, where he basically looks like he did in the beginning of The Dark Knight, just in a regular suit and all that. But then he's got this way of moving, and he makes it clear in like his very first few moments, not even the first scene itself, just the few moments of this scene, where it's the way he moves, and he like turns his head and sniffs, and it's like we immediately get the vibe that this guy is inhuman, like really inhuman, and it's basically just this hellish hunter of sorts. It's never quite clear, but that's kind of the cool thing about it. How he's just this mysterious figure throughout. And he's able to just have that really weird quality to his performance. There's that one particular delivery when he says, he calls Amber Heard's boss a fat fuck. And then it's like, even his manner of speaking sometimes, the inhuman nature of him comes out when he says, the line is basically, more paraphrasing, how would you like to be a dead fat fuck? But the delivery is dead fat, long pause, fuck. It's like, that's just so bizarre, the way he did that. But it really brings out that inhuman quality to him, and he's just throughout the whole movie. He's one of those characters that just kind of keeps popping up randomly, and you kind of can't wait for him to come back in the scenes where he's not there. And as we were talking about, our villain of the movie is a blood-soaked Billy Burke. And I love that he got this part too, because it's like, I saw him in like maybe a few comedies here and there, a few procedural dramas here and there, thrillers here and there. And then obviously he was known for a while, in the midst of making this movie, as Kristen Stewart's dad in Twilight. So when he showed up in this part, it was like, I would love to see him in more parts like this, because it's like, one of the first times we see him is when Cage is having those flashes, and he's like covered in blood and like licking it off his fingers, and he's got the long fingernails, and he's like this cult leader, and it's really fucking crazy shit. And he's another one where he's got a lot of, well, obviously a lot of crazy shit to his character. The whole idea that he carries around the femur bone of Cage's daughter, just as a trophy, and eventually tries to beat Cage to death with it, just to make that point. But then he has lines, like, what's the one in the church to Amber Heard, where it's like, I'm gonna shoot you in the throat and then watch you gurgle while I have my morning grapefruit. It's like, only this kind of character can get away with saying shit like that. Like, if this was some normal, like, crime boss bad guy or some criminal bad guy or whatever, it's like, that's fucking stupid. But this guy in this context, yes, he would totally say something like that, and it's amazing and glorious when he does. So, that's the thing, is anything, once this movie draws the line at the very beginning, it can do whatever the fuck it wants, and it seems like it totally works in context. There's not a lot this movie can't do once it establishes itself. And there are movies that do try that and they ultimately fail, but I feel like this movie is crazy enough to get away with it. There is a quote, Roger Ebert didn't like this movie, but he said something that managed to get his quote on the back of the DVD case. And that quote is so jaw-droppingly excessive that even Quentin Tarantino might send flowers. I really love that. That's perfect. It's especially from somebody that didn't like the movie overall. But yeah, it's just that's just what it is. It's this huge exercise in excess, and who better to bring that to the screen than Cage? But there are. That's not to say there aren't moments where it does kind of fall short, where it's like, the guy that directed this, and his co-writer also, 2 years before this, they made the 3D remake of My Bloody Valentine. And there are some scenes where it feels like they're kind of cashing in on that again. Like, Todd Farmer, the co-writer, is actually in the movie as he was in My Bloody Valentine, pretty much playing the same role. Like, even though they die, it's like, I think these are the same guy, regardless of how many times they meet and end. So, like, when it gets to the point where, like I said, everything is in excess, but when it gets to, like, the sex and the nudity and stuff like that, it does feel more like a retread of the fact that, probably the most famous scene in that My Bloody Valentine remake, was the extended full frontal nude scene in the parking lot of the hotel. It does it's the sex scene, too, does kind of feel like that a little bit. Well, the sex scene also is, like, you know, lifted straight from Shoot 'Em Up. I mean, like, completely. So every now and then there are those moments where it's kind of like, oh, well, this obviously is its own crazy-ass thing, but there are those things in there where you think, that's a little too much like something we saw before, and does seem more like copy and pasted in there. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it still feels like a pretty unique experience. There is even kind of somewhat vibes of the Cage having done this before because of Ghost Rider. He's got a little bit of that, but obviously to a whole new extreme. But the thing here also is the action as well, where it's kind of like, this is obviously going to be a movie that's just wall-to-wall fucking shit up. And so it's like, because it was made for 3D, and because a lot of things look really animated, is that gonna kind of hinder it a little bit? For the most part, everything still kind of seems to be intact. There are moments that actually do kind of work even when they're not in 3D, when they're clearly supposed to be, like when they're in the hotel, I think, and somebody throws an axe at Cage, and it, like, slows down, and it, like, cuts off just the tiniest piece of his hair and misses him. But then there's stuff that, like, I'm sure was cool at one point, and it's a cool setup, and it's like, I still like the scene anyway, but I mean, when William Fichtner shows up towards the end in the hydrogen truck, it just looks like this big animated mess. It's like, that probably looked a little better in the 3D format, but overall it's still fine, and they do throw in a lot of humor as well. Like, it's not a movie that takes itself seriously by any means, which surely you figured that out by now. Like there is, like every now and then there's even just a line, like when Todd Farmer's pinned against the wall by Fichtner, and he says, why do people keep hurting me? Because this is like the fourth person that's fucked him up, and he's been in the movie for like 2 minutes. There's Tom Atkinson's character, which I love, who's like the captain and the authority figure, but he basically dresses like a tourist, so it's kind of hard to point him out. I do like that character. He's not in it enough. He needed more scenes. There's the line that Fichtner has about when those guys say Jesus, and he says, yeah, I knew him, he was a carpenter, you might not know this, but he preferred short hair. Just shit like that, where it really shouldn't work, but once again, it's just all about the context. And in this context, like I said, they can do whatever the fuck they want, and probably get away with it. But there are still, like, some cool set pieces. A lot of times with the Billy Burke scenes, like, when they first walk into the church and it seems like it's like a service, but then we realize they're getting ready to sacrifice a baby. And that gets kind of intense, and then obviously like the climax, that whole setting with the kind of cult thing going on is kind of wicked looking. But yeah, and with all this going on, obviously eventually we're going to have to get to exposition land. But they bring in David Morse to do that, which was kind of a stroke of genius, because he's able to kind of give us this backstory of Cage's really late in the movie. Like, usually this is, like, totally condemnable to, like, bring in your exposition and your backstory with, like, right before the climax with, like, 20 minutes left. But the casting of David Morse to do this, he does give you the vibe that this is a guy that's been friends with this guy for a very long time, and there's, like, he gives kind of a dignity in telling the story, and he does make it feel almost, like, mythic. So that scene is well done, when it could have made the movie just kind of completely drop the ball in its awesomeness, and then you have to stop at this point. But Morse kind of keeps that afloat. Even when Cage just has to stand off to the side, it still kind of works. And yeah, like I said, I mean, you could choose to nitpick this movie. Like, this is one of those movies where cars weigh about 5 pounds. You hit a car, it's either going to explode immediately, or it's going to fly off a bridge or something. There's convenient stuff, like Amber Heard is in an empty bar, she sees a news footage about Billy Burke, and what you know, Billy Burke walks right into the room right at that very moment. And it's like, yeah, in another movie, that might need to be called out in regards to being a contrivance or stupid or laziness in storytelling or something. But I mean, this is pretty far from that. I mean, this you really shouldn't even bother. And that's the thing too, is what I also like is that the David Morse scene happens where we get Cage's backstory. And the way it falters usually when we get to this part of other movies is that they do start to take themselves kind of seriously, and it's like they do want you to feel something or something. Or they try to be a bit more than what it appears to be. This movie's not really about that, and I don't get that vibe from that scene either. That's just there to kind of show the Cage motivation. There's the whole, you know, how badly he wants that Billy Burke vengeance. So it enhances it, if anything else. And it never goes beyond that whole trying to be a little bit more than what we've seen up to this point. If this movie were to try to be something more, we'd probably get something more like, that's kind of where I had fault with, the Dwayne Johnson and Billy Bob Thornton movie Faster, where it's like that movie kind of set itself up to be something like what it looked like, but they really tried to add deep shit to it, and it just didn't work at all. This, however, it remains exactly what it looks like from beginning to end, and even if that's not really your thing, and even if sometimes it might feel a little bit too try-hard, or even if sometimes it might feel a little bit derivative, I mean, it's really hard to not commend it for just sticking to what it is and giving us this crazy-ass thing that's... It feels huge, regardless of if sometimes the animation or something looks a little cheap or whatever. It still feels like something that's a massive spectacle in this crazy-ass way that you'd only expect from a movie that has Nicolas Cage written across the top of it. There it went. That's exactly what it's like. Just things flying off and crashing. That's exactly what this movie is. So, did I want to even add anything else? Like I said, really, if anything, it is just strictly Nicolas Cage and the writers being able to exercise with excess, and that's exactly what the movie is. The end. With that being said, there is also Jonah Hex. That came the year before, actually. So, Jonah Hex obviously is based off the comic books that I have no knowledge of whatsoever. Sorry if that's that important to you, to hear somebody talk about Jonah Hex. But, no idea whatsoever. I have nothing but this 80-minute movie to go on. So, what we have here is, we start off, speaking of that, with animation. This little animated sequence that's going to tell us the whole backstory. And it's one of those cases where it's kind of like, are we getting this because this is the only part of the movie that's going to feel like a comic book? And it's like they want to get that in there, maybe hoping to set the mood because they're not quite sure if they pulled it off or not. And it feels kind of shady from the get-go because of that. But then it opens and we begin. And of course, when this movie came out, we all know it was absolutely positively trashed by pretty much everybody. Despite its promising concept and a pretty cool cast, and it seemed like an opening for a lot of cool shit to go down. Kind of like over-the-top shit like this. So we open, and we realize that they're really kind of embracing, or trying to embrace, the Western approach. Which is obviously what the setting is, and kind of where our hero comes from. So he comes in on his horse, and it's clear he's supposed to be, like, we're supposed to maybe get a vibe that he's this Eastwood type. But then, and he's dragging those corpses behind him, and it's this big shot of him coming into town, dragging those bodies behind him. And it's like, okay, I see what they're doing here. They kind of want to do the whole, they kind of want to start off with, like, a Leone vibe, I guess. And I can see on paper where this opening shot could totally work and totally evoke that kind of thing. Trouble is, in Leone movies, obviously the shots were really, really long, and those movies in general were just much more contemplative. You can't really say that about Jonah Hex, an 80-minute comic book movie that that turned out like this, because it feels like it's kind of in too much of a hurry at this point. Like, if you kind of really wanted to give it that Western feel and really give us time to kind of bask in these sets. And that's the thing, too, is I feel like if we got more time to kind of settle in them, that in itself might have made them more convincing. The fact that we're moving around so quick, obviously completely takes out the feel they may have been going for if they were trying for some Leone thing. And at least to start off with. And it makes everything feel really fast and really cheap. And it kind of cheapens everything around it, too. So, like, we come in and we do this scene, and it's a decent enough opening, even if it does feel a bit rushed, and, like I said, it doesn't really seem like it's given itself enough room to do stuff. So we've got the introduction where he drags in the corpses, and then we introduce the fact that he has big-ass guns attached to his horse that fire what has to be 100 rounds, like hundreds of rounds, just taking these dudes out, and he appoints the other dude sheriff or whatever, and then he rides out of town. It's like, especially on paper, that's a good opening, but it's clear right off that the execution is off. Like I said, I don't know if it's just the whole rushed thing, or what it is, but there's just something about it that feels very much like this movie's not gonna go as far as it needs to. And it's like the total opposite of what we get when Drive Angry starts. We just immediately get this vibe of, I don't know if this movie's gonna push itself. So we kind of go on. And once again, going on the whole, decent enough opening, we're introduced to one of the bad guys, Malkovich's main henchman, Fassbender. Michael Fassbender is one of the main bad guys in this movie, and that's very interesting. So we've got this scene with him with the dynamite on the train track, and it's like, okay, I get where this kind of has like an old-fashioned feel to it, and he's got that whole look about him, to where it's like, okay, yeah, I'm starting to feel it now. Maybe this can go somewhere. I'm only only based on Fassbender standing on this train track with fucking dynamite. But it's like, okay, my hope is back. And it's like, okay, I know people trash the movie, but, you know, surely there's something in here, maybe at least guilty pleasure material. And so we get our, you know, big explosion and all that, and then the movie goes on, and we come back to the main character, which is Jonah Hex. And it's at this point that I seem to only want to talk about the supporting cast. Which says something about Jonah Hex, the character, doesn't it? To where it's like I say, oh, Fassbender, let's you know, really get involved in this. And then it's like, oh, well, now that we've come back to Jonah Hex, I'm just kind of not that excited. And which sucks because, you know, Brolin is great, but as a great actor, but let's look at this. Obviously, we want to start with Megan Fox, I suppose. And yeah, obviously, if Megan Fox is here, people are not going to be happy. But we were still in that time. We were still in 2010. And I don't necessarily think here it's so much that she's bad. There's like kind of like obviously I defend her in the Ninja Turtles movies, which I feel like I'm in a very small minority of. And here I can't necessarily say I defend her, but it's not so much that she's bad, but number one, it's a nothing role. This role could be written out of the movie entirely, and there's not a damn thing that's different. Not a single thing whatsoever. And secondly, it's kind of like her cast... It's not her, it's her casting that's just way off. It's like, you look at her and you see, like, this whole Western setting. She's in the old costumes and stuff like that. She's supposed to be playing this old-timey prostitute, like, right out of Butch and Sundance. And it's like, all I see is a woman from the 2010s. Specifically 2010. And it's... and it's just... She just sticks out. That's the real problem. It's not even necessarily that she's bad in it. Just that her and the whole character don't even belong. I mean, I get, like, the whole, you know, prostitute with a heart of gold thing is, like, the whole thing. Like, a whole, you know, kind of a Western standard. It's just one of those things that goes with it. But pretty unnecessary. And when you have unnecessary things in a movie that's 80 minutes, you can start to see where we might run into problems. But we've got Malkovich playing our bad guy, okay? And it's like, really what he should have done here is brought what he brought to Con Air. But he's really not given enough screen time to do that. He hardly gets to revel in his bad guyness. He's just kind of here to say a couple of lines, order somebody to blow something up, or to shoot somebody at point-blank range, with hardly any time to do anything specific about it. Like, there is one moment where it's kind of like, okay, I can kind of see where he got time to put a little thought into that. And it was when, and after looking at this scene, I almost think, is he just, like, fucking with the director or something? Because it's like, the idea is that this guy they've caught wanted to avoid, oh, no, it's Wes Bentley. Wes Bentley wanted to avoid being hanged, which is why he did what he's doing with Malkovich. And so Malkovich shoots him in the back of the head, and we know the line that's coming. We know he's going to say, consider it avoided. But he shoots Wes Bentley, and then waits a long time, kind of like Fichtner with that other line. And then after a long pause, consider it avoided. There's the line you knew I was going to say, but I made you fucking wait for it. And it's like, I feel like that's Malkovich kind of having his way with the audience a little bit, which is pretty much the only chance he gets, is that one little pause and that one little line. So that's a shame. And then, weirdly enough, this is a movie where... It's one of those movies where almost around every corner is a familiar face. There's, what was he, a lieutenant? Will Arnett. Talk about people kind of sticking out. Yeah, the future Ninja Turtles cast really sticks out in this movie. There's, Aidan Quinn as Grant is fine. He doesn't really have to do anything, but he's there, and that's okay, I guess. Tom Wopat kind of gives us the feel. This would have been 2 years before he showed up in Another Western World in Django. But obviously, given his past, it's cool that he kind of is in here and kind of gives it that feel a little bit. Just his voice alone kind of has that Western feel to it anyway. So it's always nice when he pops up and stuff like this. Random Jeffrey Dean Morgan appearance as his buddy, who was also Malkovich's son, that he brings back to life just long enough to have a scene, like right off how great he was in Watchmen. Then he showed up in another DC movie. But this, before he'd go on to other DC movies later, it almost feels like he's just here to kind of fill that in. So like there's no blanks, like he's in DC as much as he possibly can. That's about it. He doesn't really get to do anything spectacular, which sucks because obviously Jeffrey Dean Morgan can really go spectacular when he really wants to, but not so much here. Once again, not enough time, but it definitely feels more like it's just a cameo anyway, so surprise. Like I said, Wes Bentley, okay, once again, Ghost Rider feel, okay, I guess it makes sense Wes Bentley's here, alright. But I do take issue with somebody that is in this. Not because they're in it, because believe me, I was set up to be totally happy. Let me read you the cast list as is on the back of this case. It's Brolin, Malkovich, Megan Fox, Fassbender, Will Arnett, and Michael Shannon. He gets the and Michael Shannon. A lot of you who saw Jonah Hex are probably thinking, where the fuck was Michael Shannon? And it's like, he's clearly in it, crucially, because he's credited on here. Well, first time I saw it, I had to Google where he was. Now it's obvious, but I mean, it happened so damn quick. So what happens here is that they go to this place, and it's one of those cases where it's like, okay, the movie's kind of got an interesting idea here. This whole kind of, it's like a bare-knuckle boxing arena, where it's like humans versus monsters, or at least that's what it's set up to be. And we've got like a ringmaster here, like an MC, an announcer, and it's Michael Shannon. He comes out, he's got those crazy Michael Shannon eyes, he's doing crazy Michael Shannon shit, and he comes out. There are 3 shots of him. 3 shots. We get one shot of Michael Shannon coming out and saying, the dude in this corner. And then we get a second shot of Michael Shannon where he says, the dude in this corner. And then we get a third shot of Michael Shannon going behind a door and closing it. And we never see his ass again. I don't know if he's in, like, deleted scenes that have been destroyed. I don't know. Google didn't help me out with this. I think he has a name. So surely he had more to do. But, yeah. 3 shots of him. Not 3 scenes, 3 shots of Michael Shannon. Looking like it's gonna be a really, you know, over-the-top kind of Michael Shannon part. And then he vanishes. He runs through that door and shuts it. It's like he's trying to get out of the movie as fast as possible. And so that's just always been really confusing. And a huge letdown for sure. So, yeah, that's weird. But going on, there are moments, sure, where, like I said, it seems like it's going to set itself up to be something, but then ultimately it just doesn't pay off. And that's pretty much what the whole movie is. To give you one particular, it's a small example, to give you just a particular example, the scene where we first really get to see Jonah Hex interact with the dead. And it's like, well, first off, you would think people would know this by this point, but it's like, he walks over to the dude and is like, dude, Jonah Hex, he's dead, you can't really talk to him. So he brings the dude back to life, and obviously it starts to burn him like it does. And then he's like, I can make it stop. And it's like, whoa, what other powers does Jonah Hex have? And it's like, it's fucking dirt. Putting dirt on him makes it stop burning. And it's like, yeah, dirt loves the dead, dead love the dirt. And it's like, well, shame for people that are buried at sea or cremated, but alright. Well, I guess cremation is where the burning would come in, but yeah. There are other forms of death that would be very unfortunate in this circumstance for those people. But, you know, and that's the thing, is it's not like Drive Angry where it's like, this is so crazy, we don't even think about that shit. Now, Jonah Hex gives us plenty of time to think about that shit. That's the problem. There was like, that's really all we had to do. Because, here's the problem. Alright, I'd like to talk to you now about the reason, the real particular reason that Jonah Hex fails. Obviously, like I said, people can point at that stuff and say, oh, that's so bad. It's like, oh, that's so poorly executed. It's like, oh, why would they do this or why would they do that? No, the big problem with Jonah Hex here is that, let's look at this. Jonah Hex was basically killed. Almost. Apparently he didn't, like, actually die, all that. But he's been there, okay? So he's back, and he can, you know, resurrect the dead just long enough to communicate with them, can control what happens to them while they're here, and he's seeking revenge for the death of his family because he in turn killed that dude's, well, he killed that guy's family, then that dude in turn killed him, then branded his fucking initials on his face. And then he comes back, he's got those big-ass guns attached to his horse, and like I said, this is a world where we've got, like, you know, bare-knuckle boxing with monsters. And it's a script, mind you. It's a script by Neville, Dean, and Taylor. The guys that made the Crank movies, they made Gamer, they made Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. These guys are off their fucking rockers, okay? They wrote this. And so, with all that said, this movie is not near over the top enough. Like, not even close. Despite having all this shit in it. There's clearly a problem here. Because what we have is, there's even stuff, like, we get into the ideas of, like, I know a lot of comparisons the movie got, naturally, was Wild Wild West. Where it's combining this Western setting, but with, like, this modern action movie with these weird sci-fi kind of weapons. And yeah, I would take Kenneth Branagh's Giant Spider any day over glowing balls of light that look like they're from a made-for-TV sci-fi movie that blow up towns in horrific animation. But the thing here is that, and I'm not one of those people that, I stress this a lot, I'm not one of those people that thinks that everything has to be rated R in order to be entertaining, or, like, you know, feel more adult or whatever. There's plenty of crazy-ass PG-13 movies that can get away with a lot. But that's what I think about when I look at Jonah Hex. I'm like, if this was, like, some really over-the-top heads exploding, bloody bodies shit, you know, I think we'd have something like Fassbender. Fassbender's death scene, his first death, I should say, when he's backed into the propeller, and it, like, I guess takes off the back, but the thing is it's like, he says, "This is for my wife," and it's this big moment of revenge, and he pushes him into the propeller, and we hear the crunch, but then it's like it just takes off the back of his head. Now, I know this is to pay off when he's able to bring him back to kill him again for his son. Like, that's actually a pretty cool way for Fassbender to go out, but I mean, still, it's like, if you were gonna kill him twice, maybe you should have used something a little less creative than a fucking propeller. Or something that would clearly chop this dude the fuck up. But yeah, and it's like, we have all these people getting shot at point-blank range, but it's always off-screen just barely. And like I said, when the dudes get shot with his gun, like, just imagine how over-the-top and fucking insane this movie would feel if Brolin would whip his horse guns out and people would just explode, like in the fucking, in the 2008 Rambo movie, for instance. And it's like, this movie would feel like it has this whole other thing going on, where it's this whole other world combining all these different things. But because we don't go that far, and the movie always seems like it could go far and never does, it's always holding back, it makes all the stuff in it that should make it this crazy over-the-top insane shit feel really bland and basic. And it's like, it seems like they barely get anywhere with it. And it's like, you just keep thinking, like, where's your fucking passion? And it's like, it's just, even with all the shit in there, it just feels, you just kind of watch it blankly. And that's the biggest issue. Not even the things in particular that happen in there that might seem really fucking dumb. Just in general, there's, like, no passion to just really take this really insane premise and just go the fuck all out with it. They just stop here when the finish line's, like, miles and miles ahead. But they're just kind of here doing a particularly safe, choppy thing. And I talk about the runtime as well. 80 minutes. It's an hour and 12 minutes. An hour and 12 minutes when the credits start. Okay? So it's like, okay, either that's really, really tightly, like, there are movies that, like, because they're so short, they feel so kind of tight and confined, and everything's happening so quickly, and everything's happening all together, and it's this breezy experience, but you still feel it. Or or a movie's that short because it's creatively bankrupt, because there are no real ideas to put into it apart from what's on the surface. Which sucks, because it's like, there's so many crazy things they could be doing, but it's like the movie's always hitting walls and hitting stops. And it's like, this is the type of point where you could take out Megan Fox's character, or even Will Arnett's character, and just do a bunch of crazy... Let's stick around with the Shannon. Let's do the Shannon scenes. Let's make that more. Let's have Jonah Hex interact with him. Let's see what the fuck he's about and what his little operation here is. Not just make it some meeting spot that's gonna fucking blow up in 2 minutes. But no, it always tries to find the more uninteresting thing to do, which is really unfortunate. And like I said, the problem here also lies with the fact that Jonah Hex is not really an interesting character. They keep saying his fucking name. Like, 90% of this movie's dialogue is people saying Jonah Hex, or some other variation. And it's like, he's here, but his presence does not live up to people constantly saying his name like he's a big deal. Despite the fact that fucking Will Arnett didn't know he could bring people back from the dead, but whatever. So, he walks around, I mean, they try to give him personality, he's got his little one-liners in there, but he's so fucking stone-faced. He's got the one look, he's got the scowl, but that's only because that's what his fucking face looks like after the shit. And even when he's in battle, even when he's in gun battle, he just looks like he looks like he's on a movie set. This is not a dude in the West whatsoever. Now, talk about the other 2010 movie where Josh Brolin's in the West. That's a whole other story. But we talked about that years ago, and now we're talking about Jonah Hex. So, with that being said, I think it's clear which of these two accomplished what they were setting out to do significantly better. Drive Angry is not a perfect movie, okay? Don't get it twisted here when I sing its praises. What it does is amazing. And I wish we had more crazy movies like this that actually were able to pull off what they were going for. And as long as Nicolas Cage is working, I guarantee we're going to have that, especially hearing about the early word on Mom and Dad and Mandy. So, an exciting new Cage year is ahead of us. And talking about Drive Angry, I feel like is a good way to kind of get that ball rolling a little bit until we get there. Obviously, Jonah Hex is Jonah Hex. So, yeah. I even went... and it was very, very cheap. Nobody wants this movie. We got this very cheap. It was like $1. And I was like, I'm just gonna see it again. Because I hadn't seen it since 2010 when it came out. It was like, there's gotta be something to this movie. I know everybody hated it. I know I particularly didn't care for it, but I didn't remember, like, hating it with a passion either. But it's like, there's gotta be something in here I missed. There's gotta be... And the way I'm willing to embrace movies more like this, that just, if they're fucking crazy, then there's no reason to nitpick or find the faults or all that. Just let them be fucking crazy. So I was hoping to find something like that in this. Like I said, especially with Nellie and Taylor writing the script. Good God. But it's like, nope, it's just here. So that's going to be what this is. I think I know what the next versus is going to be, potentially, unless I just randomly change my mind like I did this week. And yes, and I imagine by the time you see this, SAG will have just happened. I'm not totally sure, but, so we'll be talking about all that good stuff, and, yeah, all the other stuff coming up. So, yeah,